For most of us, travel, especially international travel, has been off the agenda for the last year. As the coronavirus pandemic worsened, many countries imposed restrictions on visitors from abroad. And within the U.S., states have imposed their own restrictions. Now, with vaccines being rolled out, the travel industry is hoping to see a post-pandemic travel surge. But that travel experience may be very different, and you may even need a vaccination passport. Joining us to share their insights are Tracy Rucinski, Chicago-based aviation correspondent for Reuters News Agency, Jeanette Seha, a California-based travel journalist and travel advisor, and Inger Burnett-Ziegler, associate professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. Welcome all of you to Chicago tonight. Jeanette Seha, let's start with you, please. As a travel journalist, what has the last year been like for you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. It's been quite an interesting year. I have done just one domestic trip, and for me, that's the longest I've ever been landlocked, essentially at home. I think the focus has been, instead of where to travel, how to travel, whether you're doing a staycation or you're doing a small road trip to, a national park. I think I had to pivot on how I'm covering travel. Instead of where, it's more how.
And you said you've only traveled once domestically. Most of us have not traveled at all in this last year or so. What's it been like? Was it different? Were you apprehensive about getting on a plane?
Yes, I traveled from Los Angeles to Nashville. Both of my parents live in Nashville, and my mother had multiple surgeries, so I actually went there to help take care of her for a while. So it was interesting, though. I will say I have flown in and out of LAX so many times. It was very empty. You get in through all the security lines very quickly, but it's the most empty that I've seen it in my entire life. As well as the Nashville airport was also very, very empty.
I guess one benefit, it's not so crowded. Tracy Rucinski, Americans, obviously, we face a variety of restrictions if we're traveling or considering traveling to another country, depending on the status of the virus here and there. Where can U.S. travelers go internationally right now?
Well, not a lot of places. Americans are banned from most of Europe, but we can go to most of Latin America, Mexico, the Caribbean. And so we've seen all of the US airlines really add a lot of flights to these destinations south of the border.
And at the same time, they're adding those flights, sounds like, while they've trimmed flights to Europe, for example?
Yes, there are very few flights to Europe right now. And I think you would find out of Chicago very few direct flights anywhere. There are some flights to London, to Paris, to Frankfurt, but a lot of the international flying that Chicagoans would have been used to before the pandemic just isn't there right now anymore.
Inger Burnett-Ziegler, we've had you on the show several times in this pandemic to talk about people's behavior and how we're managing it, and I'm sure it's been impactful in many ways, but how do you think people are likely to react on the other side of this pandemic? Are we going to see a release of pent-up demand?
I think so. I think people are really eager to have something to look forward to for the future. A lot of the folks that I work with are talking about feeling stuck, this sense of boredom, this sense of feeling trapped in their homes, in this routine, not having the typical outlets for joy and pleasure that they would typically have, and really wanting something to look forward to. Some folks may have had exciting travel plans last year that were canceled, and eager to be able to put those plans back onto the agenda. And I think people are thinking about safe ways to be able to incorporate that into their calendar for this year.
Inger, do you also think, is it possible that the fear that we've lived with for this last, almost a year, could that remain? And people are fearful of what might be a return to normal.
I think that that's certainly present. I think folks are concerned about the vaccine, concerned about returning to work, concerned about what the new normal is going to look like. However, I do think folks are experiencing what has been coined as this caution fatigue, and really weighing the risk against the benefits. And again, folks are really wanting to be able to soak in those benefits of connecting with folks and getting back out into the world.
Tracy Brzezinski, are they still restricting the number of passengers on planes to allow more social distance?
No, Delta is the only airline that continues to block middle seats. They announced yesterday that they'll continue to do that through April. At least they haven't made a decision as what they'll do beyond that. But otherwise, if you book a flight, you should expect it. You should expect that it could be full.
And what about passengers and masking? And are they abiding by the rules? Are airlines enforcing that requirement?
Airlines are trying to enforce it. We now have a federal mask mandate that recently went into effect. So anybody who is not wearing a mask on an airplane, in an airport, or on any means of public transportation can face a fine of $250 to up to $1,500. Airlines have also been putting passengers on no-fly lists if they refuse to comply.
And Jeanette Seha, what are people in the industry expecting the post-pandemic travel world to look like?
I feel it's a mixture. We're optimistic, but we're also very realistic and taking it week by week as there are new developments, but there are also some setbacks. And I think on a global scale, you see how some countries like New Zealand are advancing and other countries. So it's such an interesting place to be in the industry. It's really just taking it day by day, week by week, and hoping for the best. I feel most people in the industry are optimistic for the fall, and most travelers are looking at least to travel by the fall, maybe winter. That's what I'm getting a lot of questions about, also from travelers. They say, when can I go to Paris? When can I go to certain locations that are currently closed right now for Americans, but maybe in due time they'll reopen. So they're still keeping their hopes to travel abroad open.
And Tracy Brzezinski, in the lead, we mentioned the possibility of a vaccination passport. Is that kind of thing possible in the future for both domestic and international travel?
Well, there are a lot of people working on making that a possibility right now from different airlines. We've seen United Airlines and American Airlines both roll out a kind of app by which you can upload your negative COVID test or your vaccination records, where you can look to see what the requirements are in the different countries where you're traveling. But the challenge is to create a platform that can really work across all different countries and that can be accessible to people who may not have a smartphone. And then they're also looking into privacy issues as well. But I would think that in the near future, that is something that will be part of your international travel, just like your physical passport.
And briefly, before I let each of you go, when this does return to something like normal, where's the first place you're heading? Tracy, let's start with you.
Well, I'll be heading to Madrid, where I lived for a long time and still have a lot of family and friends and miss it a lot.
That sounds lovely. Jeanette?
I will be heading to France, where I usually go every year, and yes, that will be the first place I go.
Inger?
Bali was on my 2020 travel plans, and I hope to be able to add it back to the calendar as soon as it is safe.
All right, I'm going with you guys. All right, safe travel to all of you, and thanks for joining us.